Africa is rising, but some forces will stop at nothing to crush its spirit. One man stands in the eye of the storm, Ibrahim Traoré. Betrayed from within, targeted by global powers, and facing unimaginable sabotage, he refuses to bow. This is the story of courage, defiance, and a nation refusing to break. Watch as Burkina Faso fights to survive, as secrets, betrayals, and conspiracies collide, and as one leader shows the world that hope can triumph against the impossible. If you want to witness this epic journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The world had already decided his fate, though he had yet to take a single step beyond his palace gates. Across oceans, in glass towers of Washington, London, and Paris, men and women in tailored suits sipped their scotches and whispered about how to remove a single man from power. Ibrahim Traoré, young, bold, unyielding, had become a problem they could not solve with diplomacy. On his desk, intelligence reports arrived in neat stacks, the ink still drying, maps marked with red, circles indicating where sabotage had been orchestrated, explosions on highways, mysterious fires at supply depots, leaks of confidential files, all designed to make the nation appear incapable of governance, to make the world believe its leader was weak. Yet he sat silently, hands folded, as if the weight of global scrutiny could be held in a single breath. Behind him, the walls were bare, except for a single photograph, Thomas Sankara, staring with eyes that seemed to pierce through time. Traoré often wondered if Sankara could see him now. If he could see the storm gathering across the continent, the invisible chains tightening around his people. Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou were quiet. Markets were thin with traders, their shelves half empty, goods priced higher than ever. Mothers whispered to their children about famine and shortages. Soldiers patrolled with caution, eyes scanning shadows for threats that often came not from rebels, but from men in suits halfway across the world. The first blow came on a Tuesday. Convoy carrying medical supplies for rural hospitals never reached its destination. Intelligence later revealed the trucks had been intercepted, diverted, and left to rot in the northern plains. Doctors and nurses waited helplessly, while mothers in distant villages prayed their children would survive the night. News outlets in Europe spun the story differently. Headlines painted Burkina Faso as unstable, as corrupt, as unfit to manage its own destiny. Analysts debated whether Traoré was capable of governing, questioning his reforms and dismissing his vision. The narrative had already been written before the people even saw him in action. And yet, in the shadows, a different truth moved. Traoré had allies, some unknown, some long silent. Civilians smuggled messages through markets and back roads. Engineers protected critical infrastructure, and soldiers loyal to the nation, not the foreign dollar, maintained their watch. These small acts of defiance were invisible to the cameras, but they were the thread that held the nation together. The IMF's demands arrived like a storm warning. Gold reserves pledged, debts restructured, austerity measures enforced. Western contractors offered aid packages with terms so stringent that following them would mean surrendering sovereignty. Every decision, every step forward, had already been weighed in the balance against him. Traoré walked among his people, quietly that evening. He visited a rural road under construction, dusty and half-finished. Villagers worked with rudimentary tools, singing quietly to lift their spirits. A child ran up to him, holding a broken toy airplane. He took it gently, examining it, then pressed it to his chest. "This is why we cannot fail," he said softly, though only the wind carried his words. But failure was stalking him. Back in the capital, a secret meeting unfolded in the shadowed basement of a government building. Western-backed officials, generals with ambitions beyond loyalty, and foreign operatives huddled over maps, discussing ways to halt Traoré's rise. Assassination plans were sketched, infrastructure sabotage, Blackmail and media campaigns were outlined with meticulous precision, every scenario designed to ensure one outcome: his removal. Meanwhile, Trump's voice found its way into the narrative like an unwelcome thunderclap. Across television screens and social media, he mocked the young leader, questioning his ability to govern and highlighting every minor setback as proof of incompetence. "They say he's trying to build roads and airports," Trump's broadcast said. "I've built airports. I know construction. This? It's going to fail. Total disaster. Everybody's laughing." The words spread across Burkina Faso, traveling faster than the wind. Some citizens felt doubt prick their hearts. Soldiers whispered uneasily among themselves. Ministers argued in hushed tones over strategy. Yet even in the face of ridicule, Traoré's resolve remained unbroken. He spent the night alone at the planning site for a new university, walking between skeletal buildings and half-constructed walls. The sky above was dense with clouds, and a faint storm threatened from the north. Each structure told a story of ambition, each unfinished hall a testament to hope. He imagined students walking those corridors, learning not just facts, but courage. And then came the intelligence that would change everything. A dossier, stamped with secrecy and delivered without signature, revealed the depth of the conspiracy. Generals plotting with foreign contractors, Western operatives funneling funds to insurgent groups, media campaigns already in motion to undermine public confidence. The threat was not distant. It was inside the gates. It was in every corridor, every desk, every handshake that promised loyalty. Traoré knew one truth above all. His nation could not survive on fear alone. He summoned his most trusted commanders. Maps sprawled across the floor, marked with routes, choke points, and locations of sabotage. He spoke with calm authority, outlining countermeasures and secret strategies. No one could anticipate the movements of Western-backed operatives, but every move Traoré planned was designed to protect the people first. The tension grew. The night deepened, and across the oceans, the men who had thought to dictate the fate of Burkina Faso sipped their drinks, unaware that their plans were already meeting resistance, invisible but unyielding. For Traoré, the dawn would not be a beginning. It would be a battle. A battle fought not just with weapons, but with courage, vision, and the unbreakable will of a people determined to rise despite every force aligned against them. And somewhere in the world, a television broadcast would run the footage again. They said he would fail. They said he would collapse. But Ibrahim Traoré, he is still standing. A storm of conspiracy, sabotage, and global pressure was gathering, and the day the West would try to destroy him had not yet arrived. But it was coming. The sun rose over Ouagadougou with a muted glare, as if hesitant to witness the unfolding drama. Traoré moved swiftly through his capital, observing the subtle fractures caused by unseen hands. A hospital wing stood empty. Construction crews abandoned their work on a critical highway. A school's roof had collapsed overnight, despite having been newly built. Every setback whispered the same truth. Someone wanted him defeated, and they were meticulous. Western influence was no longer hidden. Contractors once heralded as partners now sabotaged supplies, ensuring that every shipment of cement, steel, and medical goods either arrived too late or in useless form. Satellite imagery, leaked to foreign news outlets, suggested corruption at every level, but the true culprit remained invisible. A global network, orchestrating chaos from afar, while questioning the integrity of Traoré's leadership to anyone who would listen. In the streets, ordinary citizens struggled to survive. Mothers whispered prayers to empty rooms, children ran barefoot through dusty alleys, and farmers tilled fields with diminishing seeds, all under the gaze of rising uncertainty. Yet even in despair, there were signs of resistance. Small networks of villagers began guarding shipments, ensuring that food and supplies reached the communities that most needed them. Their defiance, quiet but steady, was a pulse in the heart of a nation fighting back. Meanwhile, the conspirators within Traoré's own government were gaining momentum. 3 generals, once loyal, now plotted openly. They aligned themselves with foreign intelligence operatives who provided blueprints for infiltration, secret funds, and lists of allies to discredit. Every plan was calculated, every betrayal, timed to maximize chaos. The first major strike came at the airport project, the symbol of the nation's ambition. Cranes collapsed under mysterious mechanical failures. A newly delivered shipment of landing equipment was set ablaze overnight. Workers arrived to rubble and fire, eyes wide with fear, voices trembling. Panic swept through the construction site, and whispers of curses and sabotage began to mingle indistinguishably. Traoré did not panic. He arrived in the early hours, moving through smoke and debris. His boots crunched on twisted metal and shattered glass, and he called the engineers and workers together. "Rebuild," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "We do not abandon what we begin. If they want to stop us, let them try. This airport is ours, and it will rise, and not for me, but for all of Burkina Faso." Behind him, the crowd of workers hesitated for a heartbeat, but then rallied. Hammers rose, cranes were repaired, and the labor continued. One by one, the act of defiance spread like wildfire. Across the Atlantic, Western news outlets amplified the chaos, showing images of the airport, roads under repair, and schools half-built, framing them as proof of failure. Analysts criticized Traoré, calling him reckless, immature, unprepared, and then came Trump's reaction, broadcast live across the world. "I told you folks, total disaster. Roads falling apart, airports burning, leaders failing. Nobody thought he could manage this, and now, I'm telling you, it's exactly what I said it would be. Complete failure." The clip traveled across Burkina Faso and the continent. Soldiers whispered doubts. Civilians hesitated in their tasks. But somewhere in the smoke and rubble, hope flickered. It came in small acts. A farmer repaired a damaged road with stones and mortar, singing softly so no one could hear. A teacher risked her life delivering books to a village cut off by sabotage. Even soldiers who had once questioned loyalty now protected convoys quietly, unseen, letting families receive the aid promised. Traoré watched all of this, realizing that the people themselves were his greatest weapon. They were not trained soldiers, nor analysts in foreign capitals, but their courage was unstoppable. And yet, the conspirators sensed it. They moved faster, striking harder, trying to intimidate, to break morale. A major attempt to destabilize. The government came next. Secretly funded protests erupted in Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso, ostensibly led by citizens upset over shortages. But intelligence revealed the backing, foreign funds, orchestrated by intermediaries, designed to sow distrust. The streets filled with smoke and chants, voices raised in anger at Traoré, calling him a tyrant, a fraud, a failure. Traoré did not respond with threats. He went to the heart of the protests, moving among the crowd. His words were not loud, but deliberate. He acknowledged their grievances, promising transparency, and worked with the people to provide immediate relief. Slowly, the chants began to shift. Voices that once called him a fraud now whispered hope. The conspirators' plan was weakening, but they were not done. Then came the intelligence leak that shook even Traoré's closest advisors. A list of key allies had been exposed. Names of loyal ministers, trusted generals, and civic leaders, all compromised, or so it seemed. Panic rippled through the inner circle. One by one, advisors began doubting their own judgment, wondering if they too would be framed, if every action they took would be used against them. Traoré gathered them in the palace at dusk. Candles flickered across the room, casting long shadows. On the walls, he spoke of trust, of courage, of the necessity to rise above fear. He reminded them that the conspirators were counting on panic, that the world believed a small nation could be crushed by whispers and threats. "The West will try everything," he said, voice steady. They will manipulate, lie, bribe, and attack. But they cannot touch what we hold here: our people, our courage, and our will to survive. We act together, or we fall alone. Choose unity. By nightfall, a quiet resolve settled over the nation. Traoré's message had spread. Farmers, engineers, soldiers, and teachers rallied quietly. Supplies moved under cover, roads were repaired in secret, and the university project continued. Every small victory, though invisible to the world, was a brick in the foundation of defiance. Yet the Western powers were not idle. They escalated, now attempting to manipulate military leadership directly. Western contractors infiltrated training programs, bribed officers, and attempted to place agents of influence in key positions. Sabotage moved from infrastructure into logistics and communication. Every shipment of aid or building material became a test of ingenuity, patience, and courage. Traoré responded strategically. Convoys were rerouted through unmonitored paths. Engineers worked in shifts to repair damage overnight. Soldiers were briefed on identifying infiltration and misinformation. Every act of sabotage was met with counteraction, sometimes unseen, sometimes dramatic. The nation's tension was palpable. Markets were quiet. Families huddled near lamps, listening to news broadcasts and rumors. And yet, even in the darkest hours, people continued their work, their defiance a quiet hum beneath the chaos. Traoré moved among them like a shadow and a light. He did not rest. He did not falter. He was present, observing, listening, and acting. His presence inspired courage in soldiers and civilians alike. As the night deepened, another plot surfaced, an attempt to cut off power to the capital, designed to plunge the city into darkness and fear. Electricity grids were sabotaged, generators destroyed. Panic spread. But Traoré's teams anticipated it. Emergency repairs were made, critical hospitals powered, communication maintained. The conspirators had underestimated the resilience of the people and their leader. By the end of Act 2, the stage was set for the inevitable confrontation. The West's plans had grown bolder, more dangerous. Betrayal had crept into the nation's inner circles. Yet the nation's spirit, rallied by Traoré, remained unbroken. The next moves would decide the fate of the country, and perhaps the narrative of the continent. The air in Ouagadougou had grown heavy, thick with dust, whispers, and anticipation. Every street corner, every alley seemed to hum with tension, as if the city itself knew a storm was approaching. Traoré moved among his people, silent, yet alert, his eyes scanning for threats that could come from anywhere. From within the palace walls, from streets he thought he controlled, or from distant capitals across the oceans. The West had escalated its campaign. Sabotage now came in waves. Medical shipments vanished en route. Bridges were weakened under mysterious circumstances. Supply convoys were ambushed, not by insurgents, but by masked operatives whose identities were hidden behind layers of foreign intelligence. Every attack was precise, calculated, and demoralizing, and yet every act of destruction revealed something unexpected. The people of Burkina Faso were fighting back. Villages rebuilt collapsed roads overnight. Farmers guarded their fields against tampering. Students, even children, became the bearers of intelligence, spotting irregularities and delivering word of sabotage attempts directly to Traoré's command. The first true betrayal struck close to home. One of Traoré's most trusted generals, a man who had stood with him since the earliest days of his leadership, was discovered secretly communicating with Western operatives. Bank transfers, clandestine meetings, and coded messages all pointed to the general's intent to destabilize Traoré from within. Traoré confronted him privately in the palace's dimly lit courtyard. Shadows stretched across the walls as the young leader's gaze fixed unwaveringly on the traitor. "You chose them over your country," Traoré said, voice steady but edged with steel. "Do you think they care for our people? For these roads, and these schools, these lives, you've made your choice. So have I. The general's excuses faltered under the weight of truth. By the next morning he was removed quietly, his influence neutralized, but the message had spread. The enemy could be anywhere, and loyalty was a precious commodity. At the airport, the stage for the next confrontation was being set. Cranes creaked. Under heavy loads, scaffolding rose precariously, and workers labored under both the weight of their tasks and the omnipresent fear of sabotage. Traoré arrived at dawn, observing every corner, every worker, every machine. News from abroad made the tension almost tangible. Live broadcasts of the destruction and chaos circulated internationally. Analysts predicted imminent collapse. Donald Trump on live television mocked the young leader again. They've built nothing. Roads crumbling, airports failing, leaders losing control. You can't make this up. This guy's supposed to be running a country. It's a joke, folks, a total joke. The words reached Burkina Faso, but instead of instilling fear, they ignited something unexpected. Citizens whispered, if even Trump doubts him, maybe it's time we see the truth ourselves. Maybe it's time we act. Small, coordinated acts of defiance multiplied. Farmers created hidden supply routes. Students delivered secret messages across towns. Soldiers loyal to Traoré devised contingencies to protect vital infrastructure. Even as sabotage intensified, so too did resistance. Traoré's strategy became a dance of shadows. Every night, he met with trusted commanders, mapping out countermeasures, rerouting supply lines, and monitoring potential infiltrators. He knew that Western powers could strike anywhere, anytime, but he also knew their strength lay in underestimating him and his people. Then came the most dangerous moment yet. An assassination attempt during a diplomatic visit to a newly completed road connecting two remote villages. A convoy of vehicles was rigged to explode. The strike was timed to coincide with international news coverage, maximizing both damage and global perception of failure. But Traoré anticipated it. He switched routes at the last minute, using alternate roads known only to a handful of his most loyal officers. Explosions erupted behind him, flames licking the edges of the highway, but he emerged unscathed. Villagers who witnessed the fire whispered legends. He walks through fire and lives. He is protected by more than courage. He is protected by destiny. The betrayal within his own circle grew more sinister. Trusted ministers were discovered funneling funds to front organizations aligned with Western agendas. Reports of media manipulation, targeted leaks, and propaganda campaigns flooded Traoré's intelligence team. Every day, it seemed, a new front opened, a subtle, invisible battlefield where trust was both weapon and vulnerability. Yet, he remained calm. Late at night, he visited a remote village where a small school had been destroyed. Children sat on the ground among the ruins, scribbling lessons in the dirt. Mothers watched, whispering prayers for guidance. Traoré knelt beside them, examining their makeshift notebooks, touching each page with care. "We will rebuild," he whispered. "Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, today, we will rise together." The scene was private, intimate, yet symbolic. Across the nation, small acts of courage and unity were forming a silent army of resistance. Each repaired road, each rebuilt classroom, each protected convoy was a strike against the global forces attempting to crush the nation. International tension escalated further. Western powers, frustrated by repeated failures, intensified their campaign. Contractors attempted direct infiltration of military installations. Satellite imagery was leaked to foreign media showing supposed weaknesses in planning and construction. The narrative was carefully designed. Traoré's leadership must appear fragile, ineffective, and chaotic. Traoré countered with strategy. Supply convoys moved under night cover. Engineers worked in secret. Military exercises disguised as drills allowed loyal soldiers to detect infiltrators. Every time the West struck, Burkina Faso adapted, deflected, and endured. Even Trump's commentary shifted slightly as he observed the unexpected resilience. You know, I was sure this would fail. I really was. But now, look at that. Roads, schools, airports, they're still standing. How is that possible? I don't know. Folks, I just don't know. Very strange. The acknowledgement, grudging though it was, spread across social media in Africa, giving the people a renewed sense of confidence. If even the loudest critic could not deny their efforts, then the struggle was not in vain. As the climax of this act approached, the conspirators planned a final, high-risk move, a coordinated strike meant to collapse key infrastructure while simultaneously discrediting Traoré in front of the global press. They assumed the nation would fracture under pressure, but Traoré had already foreseen it. At dawn, he mobilized his loyal commanders and coordinated civilians across multiple regions. Villagers manned checkpoints. Engineers repaired sabotage sites. Soldiers secured strategic points, their discipline unwavering. Every move countered the invisible hand of foreign intervention. The day arrived. A network of sabotage was activated simultaneously. Fires, collapsed bridges, and disrupted communications were meant to paralyze Burkina Faso. Yet each act of destruction was met with preparation, with resistance, and with courage. Traoré moved through the chaos like a calm force in a storm, ensuring that the people, not fear, dictated the outcome. By evening, the first major confrontation had passed. The country had survived the coordinated attacks. The conspirators were forced to retreat, their plans exposed and partially thwarted. The people, emboldened by their leader's presence, began to repair, rebuild, and reclaim their nation. Traoré stood atop a hill, overlooking the capital as night fell. Fires from sabotage sites smoldered in the distance, casting an eerie glow, but the city lights of Ouagadougou burned brightly, defiant. He knew the West would not stop. He knew the conspirators would return with more cunning, more resources, more deception. Yet he also knew this. The people of Burkina Faso had tasted resistance, had witnessed leadership that stood unbroken, and had begun to rise alongside him. The stage was set for the final act. Betrayal, sabotage, and external forces would soon converge for a confrontation that could decide the nation's fate. The West had pushed, tested, and underestimated. Now the true battle was imminent, and Ibrahim Traoré was ready. The night was thick and restless. A black canvas stretched over Ouagadougou, heavy with anticipation. Every street, every building, every quiet alley seemed to hum with tension. The West had launched its ultimate move. Sabotage, deception, and betrayal converged in a single coordinated effort meant to topple Traoré in one catastrophic strike. Explosions rocked the northern highways. Supply convoys carrying essential food and medical aid were intercepted and burned. Power stations were attacked simultaneously, plunging entire districts into darkness. Western-backed media spun the chaos, broadcasting images of destruction with captions calling Burkina Faso a nation on the brink of collapse. The plan was clear: create fear, fracture loyalty, and destroy confidence in Traoré's leadership. But Traoré was ready. He had anticipated this final push. Under cover of darkness, he moved swiftly across the city, his commanders at his side. Communications, rerouted through secure channels, kept his loyal soldiers coordinated. Villages manned, checkpoints signaling the approach of saboteurs. Engineers repaired critical infrastructure within hours. Every act of sabotage met with preparation. Every threat countered before it could strike fully. The first major confrontation erupted at the airport terminal, the symbolic heart of the nation's resurgence. Flames licked the edges of scaffolding, where Western-backed contractors had attempted sabotage. Traoré arrived on foot, dust and smoke swirling around him, his red beret standing out against the orange glow. Soldiers and villagers had formed human chains to protect workers and equipment. With a single gesture, he commanded the reconstruction to begin immediately, moving through the chaos with unshakable resolve. Meanwhile, intelligence reports revealed the depth of betrayal in the military ranks. Generals who had feigned loyalty now revealed their true colors, attempting to seize control of key positions while the chaos unfolded. Traoré confronted them in a tense standoff within the palace compound. "You have chosen them over your country," he said, his voice calm, but ironed with authority. "Every move you make now will be remembered, not by history, but by the people whose lives you would end for your ambition." The generals faltered. A silent understanding passed between Traoré and the loyal soldiers around him. They would act decisively. In swift coordination, the loyalists disarmed the traitors, neutralizing their influence without bloodshed. The conspirators' plan had relied on fear and confusion. Traoré turned it into their undoing. Across the nation, simultaneous strikes were being foiled. Bridges meant to collapse were reinforced at the last minute. Power stations targeted by sabotage crews were guarded and repaired before darkness could dominate. The streets, once tense with panic, now vibrated with defiance. Villagers, workers, and soldiers alike became the beating heart of the nation's resistance. And then came the global stage. Live footage captured the chaos, intended to humiliate Traoré internationally. Western news anchors broadcast the destruction as evidence of failure. Donald Trump, live on air, spoke with incredulity. They said he would fail, total disaster, everybody said it. And yet, I'm looking at this footage. Roads are being repaired, people are standing. He's standing. I don't know. Very strange indeed. The grudging acknowledgement, though skeptical, ignited a spark across Africa. Social media networks flooded with commentary. If even the harshest critics could not deny what Traoré had accomplished, perhaps there was truth in the resilience of his leadership. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré moved to the newly constructed university, now under threat from arson attempts. Smoke coiled through unfinished halls, but students and teachers had stayed behind to protect the structure. With the help of loyal soldiers, fires were contained, walls reinforced, and classrooms preserved. Traoré's presence, calm yet commanding, gave courage to the defenders. Then came the most audacious act yet, a coordinated attack on multiple rural towns designed to cut off food, water, and medical aid simultaneously. Traoré dispatched rapid response teams through secret paths, guided by local knowledge. Convoys moved in shadow, supply chains restored, and critical aid delivered on time. Every time the West pushed, the nation adapted faster, stronger, and smarter. The climax of the night came at the heart of the capital. A network of saboteurs had planted explosives beneath a critical bridge, intended to sever the city from its northern districts. Traoré arrived in person, walking calmly along the bridge, assessing the situation. Soldiers followed, disarming the devices under his direction. Civilians watched from a safe distance, witnessing a leader who did not hide from danger, who did not issue orders from afar. He stood among them in the storm. By dawn, the coordinated attacks had failed. Every act of sabotage, every betrayal, every attempt to destabilize the nation had been countered, foiled, or absorbed. The conspirators were exposed, their communications intercepted, their funding traced back to foreign sources. The narrative that Burkina Faso was weak and incapable crumbled in real time. Traoré addressed the nation from the steps of the reconstructed airport. Smoke from sabotage still lingered in the distance, a reminder of the night's ordeal. He spoke not of victory, but of resilience, unity, and the courage of ordinary people. They believed we would falter. They believed fear could bend us. They tried to manipulate, bribe, and destroy. But they underestimated something fundamental, the spirit of our people, and our will to protect our nation. We did not fight for fame, nor for power. We fought for every life, every child, every future in Burkina Faso. The crowd erupted. Soldiers, villagers, and students joined in a chorus of defiance. Their unity, forged in fire and resistance, was the true triumph of the night. Across the globe, Western powers faced an uncomfortable truth. Plans meticulously executed, resources deployed, and influence leveraged had all been undone by the determination of a single leader and the collective courage of his people. Even Trump, forced to comment, could not hide a grudging respect. Look, I thought this was going to fail. Total disaster. But he's standing. The guy is standing. And the people are with him. That's unusual. Very unusual. By midday, the streets of Ouagadougou were alive with repair, rebuilding, and quiet celebration. The nation had survived the night of sabotage and betrayal, stronger and more unified than before. Traoré, though exhausted, stood as a symbol of defiance, courage, and leadership that could not be bought, bullied, or broken. The West had struck with all its might. Every hand, every dollar, every scheme had been brought to bear. But Burkina Faso had endured. The nation had witnessed the power of unity, of resilience, and of a leader who refused to yield, and Traoré knew the battle was not over. The world would continue to test him, and new challenges would emerge. But on this night, the impossible had been achieved. The conspirators had failed, the nation had survived, and hope burned brighter than ever. As he gazed over the capital, from the steps of the airport, he understood the truth that would define his legacy. A nation's strength is not measured by the absence of threats, but by its ability to stand unbroken against them. The dust had settled over Ouagadougou. Smoke from the sabotage still curled faintly into the sky, but the city breathed again. Traoré walked among the people, his presence a quiet reassurance. Soldiers marched with precision, engineers repaired. Highways and children returned to classrooms that had been rebuilt in days. The chaos of the previous nights was fading, replaced by a renewed energy, a pulse of hope that coursed through the nation. Across the globe, Western powers were forced into reckoning. Their plans, meticulously plotted, had collapsed spectacularly. Their narratives of Burkina Faso's incapacity had been exposed as manipulative fabrications. Analysts scrambled to reframe stories. Media outlets quietly shifted tone, acknowledging the resilience of a nation they had sought to destabilize. Donald Trump, for once, offered a muted, almost begrudging acknowledgement. He's stronger than I thought. The guy, he stood his ground. The people are with him. Unusual. Very unusual. Inside Burkina Faso, however, no praise from abroad was necessary. The people had seen it themselves. They had lived through sabotage, betrayal, and attacks meant to fracture their unity. Yet every road repaired, every school rebuilt, every convoy protected, was a testament to collective courage. Traoré's leadership had become more than a figurehead. It had become a movement, a symbol of what could be achieved when courage and vision aligned with the will of the people. The generals who had betrayed him were quietly removed from power, their networks dismantled, their influence erased. Western operatives who had attempted covert manipulation were exposed and expelled. Corruption and infiltration had been met not with violence alone, but with intelligence, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to the nation. Traoré visited a rural village that had been targeted repeatedly during the sabotage. Mothers and children greeted him with cautious smiles, their trust rebuilt slowly over weeks of quiet, determined protection. He walked through fields and classrooms, inspecting repairs, listening to concerns, and inspiring confidence. The West believed we could be broken, he said softly to the villagers, but it is not external threats that define us. It is our courage, our unity, and the choices we make every day. Every brick you lay, every seed you plant, every lesson you teach, that is the true power of Burkina Faso. In the capital, major infrastructure projects continued at full speed. Airports rose from the ashes of sabotage, modern highways connected distant regions, and universities opened their doors to eager students. Each new structure was more than concrete and steel. It was a symbol of resilience, progress, and self-determination. International observers took notice. Headlines shifted from doubt to astonishment. Burkina Faso survives global pressure. Traoré emerges as unlikely leader of Africa's resurgence. A nation stands against sabotage and thrives. The story of a young leader defying overwhelming odds spread across the continent, inspiring movements of hope, resistance, and national pride. Even in distant capitals, discussions were held in hushed tones. Western diplomats, once confident in their strategies, now questioned their approach. Burkina Faso had not only survived, it had emerged stronger, more united, and more capable than ever. Traoré had shown that influence, pressure, and manipulation could not suppress the will of a determined people led with vision and courage. The young leader returned to the rebuilt university. Students crowded the steps, eager to hear his words. He spoke not of himself, but of them, of teachers who had refused to abandon classrooms, of soldiers who had guarded convoys at night, of families who had persevered in the face of fear. "You are the reason we stand today," he said. "Not I, you. Every life, every act of courage, every choice to do right in the face of danger. That is what shapes our future. We have survived, not because we were promised safety, but because we refused to surrender to fear." His message echoed beyond Burkina Faso. Across Africa, nations watched with awe as a small country defied manipulation and external pressure. Citizens began to rise in solidarity, inspired by the example of resilience. Traoré had become more than a leader. He had become a symbol of a continent reclaiming agency and refusing to bow to foreign influence. In the months that followed, the nation rebuilt fully. Roads stretched across valleys and plains, connecting communities. Airports handled flights to previously isolated regions. Universities produced graduates ready to shape the nation's future. Healthcare systems stabilized, food supply chains strengthened, and trust was restored. Burkina Faso was reborn. Traoré stood once more on a high hill overlooking the capital. The sun set behind the city, casting golden light over completed highways, shining airport terminals, and gleaming university buildings. The nation's heartbeat was strong, rhythmic, alive. And as he looked out, he posed the question silently, not just to himself, but to the world. Could this be the moment Africa begins to rise on its own terms? Could courage, unity, and determination finally outweigh manipulation, fear, and oppression? The answer was written in the streets, the buildings, and the hearts of the people. Burkina Faso had endured. It had resisted. It had risen. Traoré had survived attempts to destroy him. Yet his victory was not personal. It belonged to the nation, to the people, to the spirit of resistance that no foreign hand could ever extinguish. The West had tried. They had tested every measure, every influence, every method. And yet, they had failed. Burkina Faso stood tall, a nation transformed. And at its heart, Ibrahim Traoré remained unbroken, a symbol not just of defiance, but of the unstoppable potential of a united people. The dawn had come, not just for one nation, but for the hope of an entire continent.